Segment two, and joined by Kevin Sullivan, not Sully Sullenberger. Make no mistake, but one of my favorite guests on our show, and he's been on every probably the last 3 or 4 years. As we just talked offline, Kevin and I could have this discussion at the Triple X as easy as we're going to have it right now. And Kevin, of course, a media expert, Kevin Sullivan Communications, a Purdue grad, uniquely qualified to talk about not only sports media, but media, and always has got some interesting insight, not only because it's his beloved Boilermakers. I mean, make no mistake, Kevin Sullivan, not only does he read goldenblack.com more than he should or listens to us more than he should, but he also bleeds gold and black. But he also wants the program to continue to thrive. And we're going to hit all those issues today. Kevin, as I always say, a highlight of your media career is being on our show, but we appreciate that.
It is a thrill because the Saturday simulcast is must watch appointment viewing for me. So to be included in the pantheon of the Golden Black family is really a thrill and an honor. So thanks for having me on.
Man, you are a lonely man. No, I don't think that. When you get access to Brian Newbert and Tom Dienhart and that great wisdom that comes from those guys, we appreciate the fact that you are. Yeah, hey, no doubt. All right, it is a crazy world out there. There's been so much discussion about where college sports is going. Let's start with one of the big changes. Obviously, Purdue is going to try to respond, react, improve, with stating that nicely from the most catastrophic season in the history of the program in 2024. Barry Odom takes the job in December. You had some interesting comments just about the difference between what you saw in Barry Odom, and this is not going to be a Ryan Walters bashing session, but this is a difference, a critical view of the difference in what Purdue might have as its head coach as compared just to looking at the press conferences between the two just a couple years apart.
In my consulting life, I work with a lot of young and a lot of first-time head coaches and MLB managers, and I always encourage them to talk about how they are prepared for the moment. So when Ryan Walters got introduced, I thought he won the press conference. Yeah. I was very impressed. And he told the story of, as a college athlete sitting in the video room, watching the head coach and saying, I want to do that one day. And every moment since then I'm paraphrasing here, preparing for today. And I loved it. He invoked some storytelling. He had this energy about him, the youthful vibe, which I thought would be appealing in the NIL era, where it's some of those intangibles are really important. And so I was very impressed. And then we found out, as it turned out, he didn't really have the goods. And I don't mean that harshly, but it seemed, as a fan, I have no inside knowledge whatsoever. There seemed to be chaos on the staff. Graham Harrell gets blown out midway through or early in the second year, there just seemed to be things just in the margin of those defeats would indicate that something was wrong beyond the talent gap between Purdue and Penn State, or Purdue and Ohio State, or whatever it might be. They didn't seem to be prepared to play on certain days. So now we fast forward to the Barry Odom. And we know, because we've seen Barry before, we know that he's more of a meat and potatoes sort of guy. But I loved how, he did not do an opening statement, and I'm a fan of the opening statement, but he went right to questions. And in effect, I think Dienhart had the first question, and he kind of said what would have been his opening statement, which is, we're going to be blue collar, was the first words I think he used to describe what Purdue is going to be. We're going to be tough. And then he used the word disciplined, which was music to my ears, because the team appeared to be undisciplined the last couple of years. And even the last year or so of the Brom era, there were some stupid penalties and some appeared to be a lack of discipline at times. And so I love that. But then the next thing he did was he invoked the name Joe Tiller. And, for Purdue to be successful, setting aside the power of NIL and the portal and all that, Coach Tiller found diamonds in the rough, and got all those 3-star guys that ended up, many of them in the NFL, and And, the famous, Matt Light changing positions, he and his staff did so much with these diamonds in the rough. And that's maybe the kind of place that Purdue is always going to be or needs to be, with the occasional, 4-star dropped in there. So I love the fact that he talked about discipline and the fit with Purdue, and he praised the fans and that sort of thing. So where I thought, Ryan Walters had a little bit more storytelling and sort of energy and appeal that way, I just loved the way that Coach Odom seemed to be such a good fit, and probably exactly what we need given the debacle of 2024.
Well, and you've been around a 1980 Purdue grad. You saw Jim Young, who was a personality. You've dealt with it, obviously, the Dallas Mavericks, and in your media life. Different guys can do it. There's no guaranteed formula of success, but Purdue's got its own challenges. I mean, it is especially in the world of college football, especially in the world today, to be competitive. And this is something that it is not going to be easy. But from a fan standpoint, we talked about offline, Tom Dienhart talking about, I don't know who these guys are. Purdue's going to have maybe up to 50 new players, as was the case with Odom at UNLV. I think he had 55 and 50 in his 2 years, new players. Talk about the need and what men's basketball has done so well in building personality, building stories, and what you would, if you were in the shoes of making that decision of what needs to be done at Purdue football to ingratiate it with the fan base. And that's above and beyond just winning.
Yeah, the Purdue Athletics social and digital team is extremely capable. They do a lot of good things. And Exhibit A that any program in the country could learn from is the ELF series with Caleb First, which they did it 3 times. Each time was a little better than the year before. It obviously had a charity component. The appeal there was broad, and it was funny, and it was touching, and it showcased Caleb's personality and his heart. And it was extraordinary. It was very, very effective. And I would say, the pressure on football is, number one, to tell the story of the players off the field. Let people get to know Chauncey Magwood. We're his 3rd school, I think. There's some guys we're the 4th school. And I enjoyed, Dienhart did a good interview with Crew Wakely where we got to know him a little bit. Like more and more of that, but then also for Purdue Athletics to seize the opportunity to help the players tell their own stories, because ultimately that's what's going to drive their own NIL opportunities. If sponsors and outside brands and companies get to know these guys, and you do not have to be a superstar. There's a lot of evidence of this.
Yeah.
There's high jumpers and softball players and you name it, men and women across all sports who have been able to get NIL deals because they've used their personality. Now, people say to me sometimes, well, I've got to be authentic. Well, authenticity can be a little bit overrated, because if you're not, your authentic self on a given day might not be you at your best. It would be authentic for you to be in a bad mood or angry or irritated or down. And you have to set that aside and show the world the best version of yourself. Steph Curry, the Warriors are a team I work with on a regular basis. And when Steph Curry won his first MVP award, he spoke directly to his teammates and said, you can have your own journey, your own story, but be yourself, but be the best version of yourself. And that's what young, student athletes need to do too, is sometimes just, profanity or, crossing the line on certain things off the field or off the court is not a good idea and will not appeal, even though it may seem authentic in that moment to that player. Yeah. So Purdue Athletics getting with the players and saying, let us help you tell your story. And I know they provide the players with clips and different things. So I think more of that would help in football, and maybe they've done more than I know, and I've missed it, but I see it more in basketball. And obviously with men's basketball, we've had a lot to work with, but they do a great job, and they're going to figure it out. But I do think that's one of the keys. And also fan sites like Golden Black with Brian and Tom, and I know you cleared some cap space to get some room for Mike Carmen. That's those guys do a great job of telling the stories too, and all of that adds up.
Yeah, it is. It is about storytelling and making personalities of, and I think for fans to be able to feel like they can relate in some fashion.
And by the way, one other thing
Yeah,
about Coach Odom that I loved is in his interview, his first sit down with, I think it was a Saturday simulcast with you
yeah,
and
right. With
maybe
Tom.
just Tom, but he said, "I get how important what you guys do is, and the connections to the fans." And I loved, when he got off the plane, when he arrived that night that he got to West Lafayette, there was a message that had gone out saying there will be no access to Coach Odom. Kind of the fans could come out and welcome him, but he went off the plane and went right to the fans,
Yeah.
and I thought that was very cool and important that that he got that. So I'm fired up.
Yeah, and I think that there's a reason for some optimism certainly there, and it will be won't be an easy year in terms of schedule, as never is in the Big Ten, but it'll be fun to watch to see how that develops. Now, you talked about social media, and you talked about the Purdue's top Instagram post we get offline in the last 4 years, or currently was a post 4 years ago. I think it was with Aiden O'Connell in Nashville, and the importance it is there. But I mean, the fact that Purdue men's basketball, especially, has blown up because of success on the court, because of Mackey Arena and the personalities there. The Purdue fan base can play at this level. Is that your fair estimation, having been around it for a few decades?
Absolutely. And in fact, I loved, we go to Oregon, and after the game, Nate Biddle is saying, "I can't believe all these Purdue people that were here."
Yeah.
We saw, and by the way, at that game, longtime Purdue fans may remember the famous Bar Brothers. There were 5 Bar Brothers that played football at Purdue. Maybe the only time there have been 5 brothers. Sadly, Tom Barr, who was the youngest, passed away a little over a year ago. But Phil Barr was at that game because he lives in Portland. So shout out to the Barr brothers and Phil for showing up for the Oregon win. Purdue, and it's funny. I always thought, when Wisconsin rose in football under Barry Alvarez, I always said I thought that could have been Purdue, because Madison can't be an easy place to recruit to in terms of the weather and all that stuff. We're 125 miles from Chicago. We're closer to Chicago than U of I, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Michigan State has had some great years in football. Why can't we be like that? Like that maybe that level right below Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. Now we've got Oregon and the West Coast teams in there. But I absolutely reject the notion that Purdue is not a place you can recruit to. The superpower that Purdue has is its people. And once you get somebody on campus, in fact, one of the things that Crew Wakely told Dean Hart was, I had no intention when I visited of signing with Purdue. But when I got there and I saw the place and I listened to the coaches, I thought, man, this is the place for me. And that's the thing, we got to get these guys there. The facilities are top notch. The arms race that took place, 10, 15 years ago with facilities has leveled out, and is not to keep quoting Dean Hart, but the barber chair in the locker room is not the most important thing anymore. Everybody's got that. It's what you can do revenue wise. And and I know that Mike Babinski will figure this out, the best way to divide up that $20.5 million, across the sports, with, the majority of it's going to go to football. But, places like, Kentucky and Kansas and others where men's basketball is a bigger deal maybe than football. I don't know if you can say that out loud. Purdue is sort of, in that neighborhood. Not, I don't know if I would agree with that, but how you divide it up between men's basketball and football, and then whatever's left over is going to everybody else, and that's going to be the reality. So and NIL will still be overlaid in there. So,
all right. Well, television contracts and just the world of media. I mean, obviously, all this money, and I will fall short of calling it a windfall, but it has the most recent contract, the Big Ten and the SEC, because of football, have ballooned out, and yet some of the things we saw last year, not only Purdue, but a lot of Purdue, 4 or 5 complete blowout losses on, I think Gary Danielson and I had that conversation. The 2 games he did on CBS were 49-10 and 66-7 in Ross-Age Stadium. My point is, that need for competitive balance. And the next time the television contracts roll around, which I think is around 2029, who knows where all this ends up.
Right.
But Purdue has to be asked to the dance, and that Purdue-Ohio State game on NBC or Peacock or CBS needs to be competitive in some fashion if you're going to continue to have 18 teams in the Big Ten get that television exposure. Is that a fair assessment in your view?
Absolutely. And, there are, plenty of conspiracy theories out there that when the next batch of contracts, media rights contracts comes up,
right,
that the Big Ten and the SEC are going to form some sort of superpower and pick off a Clemson and Florida State and a few other programs. And there might actually be relegation. I don't know that that's going to happen, but if you're not competitive, you are going to be in peril just in how the revenue gets shared, maybe, if nothing else. And, just on the topic of what's coming in the media, number one, if you're a Purdue fan who is still lamenting 2 years in that you have to subscribe to Peacock, get over it, because this is how it is. We have NFL wild card game the last 2 years streaming. We've got, this is how it is now. And the thing that you're going to see more and more of, not just streaming, players mic'd up, in-game interviews, all of this is coming. I read recently with interest that Madison Square Garden Network, which was formed in 1969 as the first regional sports network,
right?
And now you think of the regional sports networks as being this dying thing. Well, the way MSG Network is reinventing itself is through virtual reality and augmented reality, and that's coming, and that'll be in that next media rights package. Who has rights to that? So that when you're sitting at home watching the Purdue Washington game, which, by the way, was attended by the great Karen Snepp, who lives in Seattle, and we talked about her the last time I was on as we were reminiscing about the 1980 Final Four. But you're going to be sitting in your living room as if you're in Mackey Arena or in Seattle watching that game. That's coming. Cosm is a company. There's one in LA. There's one in Dallas. I haven't visited yet. It's in the Colony, Texas, in the suburbs, and it's one of these immersive, like the Sphere in Las Vegas, on a smaller scale. And so the Mavericks are playing the Celtics on Saturday. You can go watch it at Cosm in this immersive dome thing. And I looked today before the show, and it's sold out. There's standing room tickets available, and so all of these immersive experience things are what people are going to be, are where the media is headed for sports. And then, of course, there's AI, which who knows where that's going to lead. They talk about automated highlights where, your system is going to know what you like, is going to feed you things and not feed you other things. Advanced analytics, of course, alternate feeds are already there. That's going to grow. And then finally, a few years ago, the NHL with Disney did a game, an alternate broadcast of a game through Big City Greens, which is a Disney Channel show. And now you've seen copycats on that with The Simpsons and other Disney products with other leagues. So it's really just what your imagination can how far your imagination can take you. It's all coming, and just embrace it, enjoy it, and I think there'll always be a way to watch the game and listen to Tim Newton and Mark Herman on radio. Like in the original format, but there's going to be lots of options. And you're right, Purdue has to be competitive to fully reap the benefits for all these things. First in football, and then men's basketball, and then women's basketball, of course. And of course, we've got a great volleyball program as well. But all the rest of it's all driven. 85% of the revenue, I believe, is the number, is from football. So as much as we like and love volleyball and the women's sports and the swimming and diving program, which has produced Olympians and all the other, track and field, everything else. I was, and my beat was wrestling in the my sports information days. But all those programs are going to have to be telling their own stories in order to get attention.
All right, so you can insert Lance Jones' three-pointer at any point in time while you're watching the game, just to make yourself feel better, and maybe somehow from an augmented realities, that may be the world we're going to be living in It is crazy from that standpoint. Let's talk about your days. It wasn't that long ago, but you were in the Purdue Sports Information staff, a crack group. We also have a Chris Klink shout out as well. There's a lot of guys in your group that went on to do some really good things. Mark Brand at Arizona State on down the line.
Hall of Famer Tim Clojo was sort of the captain of the student crew. Yeah. He's gone on, and we work together now, and he's actually a part-time employee of Major League Baseball as an official scorer, does other stat jobs for MLB at games. And we mentioned Karen Snepp. Lori Kiley went on to great things. Of course, the late Karen Croak Heisler was a grad assistant, and then Brooke Merrow. I mean, we had an unbelievable John Hacksaw Hostetler went to work at the NSA because I guess he was the smartest guy maybe in the room. And Hack, who is probably the most creative person at taking on Indiana, which it's tough for us to do right now. Although I will mention Paul Jensen, our fearless co-leader as assistant SID, recently texted me and Cloge to point out that Indiana's lost to Northwestern 5 times in a row in men's basketball. So Hack was always great at the IU stuff. And Muhlenberg, we used to call him Kent Olinger. We had Railman, Don Koich. I don't want to leave anybody out. He went on to a great career at Eastern Illinois, then U of I and North Dakota, and back to U of I. And Craig Mundell, Captain Party was his nickname. It was an incredible group, and that's where I learned how to do what I've been doing for the last 44 years. Really, was right there with Tom Shoup and Paul Jensen and my fellow coworkers. It was the best time. I mean, it was a great way to learn. And I tell young people, go find an internship or volunteer, because that's what's going to set you apart and qualify you and help you learn what you like and don't like.
Yeah, take it, learn it, and adjust it, and you had that opportunity to do that. Right. What makes you optimistic, though, in the world? I'll start with college sports, and I'm going to bring you into media relations, just in the world that we're living in. But what makes you optimistic that 15 years from now we're going to be enjoying this at the level that? You mentioned all the great things going on, and from AI on down, the technology. But what keeps fans not only going to games but engaged? What makes you optimistic that's going to be the case down the road?
Well, live sports, we're talking about this cluttered media landscape, and live sports is the only thing immune basically from on-demand viewing and the DVR, thing. I mean, people want to watch it live, and sports brings people together like nothing else. It just, we have the World Cup coming to Dallas in 2026. The Bush Presidential Center here in Dallas, where I'm involved, is going to do an exhibit on how the power of sports to bring people together, semi in conjunction with the arrival of the World Cup to the Dallas area. But that's what gives me hope and optimism in a world where people are dealing with a lot, mental health issues and inflation, and we've just come through a lengthy election cycle. The sports has the power to lift people's spirits, man, and that's what gives me hope. And that's you mentioned media coaching that I do. That's what I tell the players is whether you're with the New Orleans Saints or the Chicago White Sox, be happy no matter how the team is doing, from the standpoint of people are coming to you as an escape. Now, I know those of us that really care, sometimes we live and die and take it hard, but for the most part, sports brings people together and can lift our spirits. And that's what gives me hope and optimism.
All right, one last question I got to ask you, and we could go on all day on this deal, but Zach Edey is another guy that has already started to prove the doubters wrong, but you've had a chance to be around him a little bit and watch him also, because you were uniquely qualified to understand the NBA in your days with the Dallas Mavericks and all that you've done in that arena, so to speak. But talk about Zach and how you build that brand, but also he's obviously doing some very good things on the court, maybe even exceeding all of our expectations. But talk about how you view that.
I do a lot of media training with teams, and the Memphis Grizzlies are one of my clients, and so obviously I had never met Zach. It was really kind of fun to have that opportunity, and before we got started, I had the chance to introduce myself, and he was really nice. And it was fun talking to him. We talked about the upcoming season at that time, the season we're in now. But I told him, my message to him was that in Memphis, Taylor Jenkins, their head coach, is outstanding. Just not only from an X's and O's and a coaching standpoint, but a leadership standpoint. And they have a communications and PR team there, led by Laura Arrett, that is fantastic, among the best in the NBA. And so I encouraged them, listen to them. They'll take care of you. And then I pointed out that the media in Memphis, the local media has obviously been affected in enormous consequential ways the last 10 years. But the media in Memphis is, I don't mean they're not objective or they're homers, but they want to see Zach do well. And it's a positive or not a harsh, challenging, media environment like you would find in New York or Boston or Chicago or somewhere. So I encouraged them. I said, let these people get to know you a little bit. And if they get to know you a little bit, it's going to be a good thing for you. It's going to be a good thing for the team. And I don't know that I persuaded him. He's a little bit guarded, and I understand the reasons why, with the media. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then during the actual presentation in front of the whole team on the topic of building goodwill, I used as an example, and you helped me kind of cook this up, the story of during the NCAA tournament, which is the only time, college players have media in the actual locker room, if I'm not mistaken. And there was a crush around Zach, and the PR person or the security person came in to break it up. And Zach noticed that Brian Newbert, who had been covering him day in and day out for 4 years, had not gotten to ask a question yet. And before the media was ushered out, Zach said, "Hold on a second, Brian, do you have a question?" And I used that for the whole team as an example, or all the young players, that was an example of building a relationship, with a player, and just how impressive that was, that he looked out for Brian in that setting. Didn't forget the local guy just because he was on this big national stage. I think this was at the Elite Eight, maybe. It was not the Final Four, but anyway, so it was fun to talk to him and watch him. And then on the court, I don't know if he'll, the Rookie of the Year talk. I think Steph Castle, our old championship game nemesis,
who's really good
in San Antonio, seems to be the leader. The interesting thing, Jalen Wells, Edie's teammate on the Grizzlies, who came from Washington State, is having a fantastic year too. So the Grizzlies have two of the top three. There's a couple other guys in the mix, but I have to apologize to Golden Black fans. I came on before the draft with you and said, hopefully he'll go late first round. Maybe the Celtics, a team that likes bigs, that's already winning, that's not going to count on a rookie. And sure enough, he goes number 9 and he's in the starting lineup. Now, if you watch, matchups are still a little bit of a thing. And if you follow the Grizzlies box scores, like I know a lot of Purdue fans do, there are times when he starts but doesn't get a ton of minutes, and it's kind of matchup based. But he has worked incredibly, and I got to watch practice with the comms team from the Grizzlies, and I could see, this was early in training camp, I could see how much his teammates had taken to him and were helping him and pulling for him, and what a good teammate he was, which of course we knew that was his reputation from his time at Purdue. But I'm really pulling for him, and the other Boilermakers out there that I run into. Of course, it's always fun to talk Purdue basketball on the NBA circuit.
All right. Well, we appreciate your time, Kevin. Years of experience as the graphic. If you're just listening to this, I want to make sure people know too. I'm kind of on the back end of this, but making sure that years of media experience, the Bush White House, Department of Education, NBC Universal, NBC Sports, and Dallas Mavericks, and most importantly, his days in West Lafayette and the group that he put together. But it's going to be, we always appreciate your time because it's a busy time every day for you, but your insight into this is great. And we are the local folks. We like to Penn ourselves, and we appreciate. We've actually been very fortunate with Purdue over the years to have a good relationship from that standpoint. Last thing, you get the last word, my friend. Anything else that you want to bring to the table? It's all yours.
I just want to, thank you and the team. Brian and Tom, you're my lifeline to the inside stuff. And I love the fact I know, in the Brom years, it was a little bit of, top secret. Everything was held so close to the vest. A coach does that at his own peril, if you ask me. Now, you can do it if you're winning. I've had a lot of people, coaches over the years, say, why can't I be like Greg Popovich or Bill Belichick and keep the media at arm's distance? I said, win a bunch of championships and then do whatever you want. But in the meantime, the fans crave this kind of engagement. So I'm grateful to you and the whole team at Gold and Black, because you are my pipeline for Purdue info, and and I really appreciate it. And thank you for having me on.
All right. Well, you'll be in the house in a couple of weeks when Purdue takes on USC in a Big Ten game, right? Yeah, that's how it works now.
I will. And by the way, I have two great nephews, Colin and Connor Davis, shout out, who live in Cary Quad, who I'm going to be taking to breakfast at the Triple X.
There you go.
So I love the Triple X, and even if it means having root beer for breakfast, I'm going to do it. But I also may get there on game day. We'll see, and I'll get to Harry's for sure. Maybe.
I know you'll do that. That part I know. Yeah. There you go. And be very responsible at the same time.
And I'll be sure to pump some money into the West Lafayette Academy at the big team store too. So
yeah, we need all the help we can get. All right, my friend. Hey, thanks again so much. We will be back in a couple minutes. Dr. Andy Mesecar will join us from the Purdue Cancer Institute. Big night tonight at Mackey Arena for Purdue, Michigan, because it's Hammer Down Cancer. It's also going to be a hell of a basketball game, I think, but we appreciate them. Kevin, thanks again, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes on Gold and Black Live.